I'm on break, so I need to put out a video before I go back to college. Hello, this will probably be a very brief video on a few tips I have for people looking to start a webcomic. I'm by no means a professional, but I just wanted to share a few things I picked up along the way that would probably be helpful to someone who's just starting out. So, my experience with webcomics is that I've been working on one for about 4 years now. IMAGINATIVES, link in the description, like and share, thank you. I pretty much dove in without really thinking about all the technical stuff, and so the comic started off a little rough. Over the years I've improved my work, and I'd like to think that at least some of the knowledge I picked up was useful. So here are just some tips that you should keep in mind before starting. Tip number 1 is to know your genre. Knowing your genre is very important as it sets expectations for your readers as to what they should expect when reading your story. Since there are hybrid genres, I'd say you want to at least know what the main genre of your story is. Like, what is your story mainly about, basically? As it'll give your readers something to cling onto, and something for you to cling onto in terms of structuring your story. But as you get a little further down into structuring your story, you might find that you're swaying towards another genre, and this might lead you to a genre switch. And as an Ezreal kid, I wanted to make a comic that was clearly influenced by that show, and so I started off with the idea of IMAGINATIVES being more of a comedic and episodic series. However, as I progressed further into the story, I wanted to focus more on building character relationships and more complex storylines, including world building. I didn't completely ditch the comedic tone of the earlier volumes, but I did tone down the randomness and humor quite a bit. If you find yourself stuck at this point, I would say that you should start thinking about ways to very carefully integrate the new genre into the old genre. Otherwise, the audience will experience tonal whiplash. Tip 2 is paneling. This is a mistake that I've sadly been making for a very long time until arguably this year, and it's something that I'm still working on. Paneling is super important to presenting your webcomic. No duh. This one's the shortest tip, but it's also really important to keep in mind. Good paneling makes the comic more visually appealing and conveys the story in a more meaningful way. I made the mistake of making all my panels the same size and the same shape back when I started. This is less of a problem for comic strip artists, but for webcomic series, you'll want to look more into methods of how to make your panels pop, such as characters kind of briefly stepping out of the panel, changing the shape of the panels, etc. Tip number 3 is to know your audience. When you start to gain an audience for your work, you'll want to pay attention to what draws their attention to your story, and what they like about it. This reason is why switching genres is so risky, especially if the genres aren't really related to each other. Learning what draws in your audience is important to retain their attention and keep them coming back to read your story. This is why you should be more involved with your community. Being involved with your community can be done in a lot of different ways. Setting up a server where you can communicate with fans, setting up Patreon, even replying to comments is enough to help grow your community. Listening to your readers will give you a good idea as to what they expect from you as an author. But at the same time, listening well to your audience doesn't mean that you should always cave in to their suggestions. And tip number 4 is to not cave into fan service. Caving into fan service is a good way of losing sight of the story that you wanted to create. That isn't to say that all fan service is bad. Fan service is a good way of showing how much you appreciate the audience every now and then. However, you shouldn't be changing the story on a whim because readers want the story to go a certain way. To me, bad fan service has a lot to do with derailing the plot. For example, shifting focus on a plot-heavy moment to focus on a fan-favorite character doing something unimportant. Zeroing in on making a fan-favorite ship canon, even though there was no chemistry established beforehand, and wildly changing a character's narrative to fit fan interpretations, and the list goes on. This all comes down to the quote, "If you try to please everyone, you will please no one." By trying to meet all your readers' demands, you risk jeopardizing your own storyline. Derailing the story to cater to the wishes of some readers will always end up alienating others. Although it's good to pay attention to criticism and the thoughts of your readers, it's also important to present your story as you intended it in the first place. And for the last tip, tip number 5, don't expect instant success. When you start your webcomic, don't expect fast or instant success. A lot of webcomics take time to get picked up by audiences, and even then, only a rare few become mega huge. One of the most important things I think when making a comic is to do it because you enjoy it. Webcomics take a lot of time, care, and motivation, so don't stake success as your sole motivator. That's a good way to leave yourself feeling burned out early on. If you're looking to make connections through work, try reaching out to others, collab, all that stuff. I know my marketing skills need a lot of polishing, so you should really think about that before starting your webcomic, especially if you want to take it somewhere and make it big. That's pretty much all I have. I'd say the best way to learn about this stuff is to look up the successes and failures of other webcomics, what works and what doesn't work. What do some authors do that appeal to you while others leave you unwilling to read more? As always, I'm looking for more things to read and more people to interact with, so if you have your own webtoon that you'd like to share, I'd be happy to read it. That's all. Thank you, bye.